The market was alive with noise. Voices shouted from every side, calling for buyers, bargaining for prices, showing off cages filled with slaves. The smell of smoke, dust, and fear mixed in the air, making the place heavy. Merchants laughed and waved their hands, each trying to sell their slaves for the highest price. Some slaves were strong, tall, and young, shone like trophies. Others were skilled workers, cooks, or fighters, all carrying signs that told their worth, but in the corner, far from the bright torches, sat a small figure. She was thin, her body weak, and her skin marked with scars. Her hair was dirty, falling across her face, hiding her tired eyes. Her hands shook as she tried to cover herself with the little cloth she had. No one came near her cage. No one wanted to touch her. Her price was written on a broken wooden board. 10 credits. The crowd laughed whenever they saw her. 10 credits? A tall alien snorted. That is less than the price of a meal. Another said. She is useless, shouted a third. She will die in days, why waste money? They all laughed louder, their voices cruel. The merchant who owned her only shrugged. He had tried to sell her for months, but no one wanted a broken slave. Her eyes, dull and hopeless, showed no fight left. She sat in silence, waiting for her life to end. The market went on, bright and busy. Gold exchanged hands. Buyers shouted for fighters and workers, but no one looked at the broken girl. She was nothing but a shadow in the corner, forgotten. Then, in the middle of the noise, he appeared. A human, tall, with sharp eyes and a calm face. He walked slowly, not shouting like others. His clothes were simple, his steps steady. He looked around with quiet attention. The crowd turned to look at him, some whispering, "What is a human doing here?" Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and many aliens distrusted them. The human moved past the strong slaves, past the workers, past the children. He stopped when his eyes fell on the corner. There she was, the broken girl, the slave. No one wanted for a moment. Silence fell in his heart as he looked at her. Her face was thin, her eyes half closed, but something flickered there. A spark so small others missed it. The human saw it. He stepped closer to her cage. The merchant laughed loudly. "You want this one?" "No, no, sir, look here. Strong fighters, strong women, skilled cooks, all worth your money, not this trash." The crowd burst out laughing. "She is broken," one said. "She is nothing." Another added, "Even rats are worth more." But the human did not listen. His eyes stayed on her, watching her trembling hands, her weak breath. There was a story written in her scars, a story no one cared to read. He asked, "How much?" The merchant blinked, then smiled like a snake. "Only 10 credits, he said, raising his hands. "But don't waste your money, human. She is useless." The human reached into his pocket and placed the credits in the merchant's hand. The market went silent for a moment. Then laughter exploded louder than before. "You fool," someone shouted. "You wasted 10 credits." Another cried, "She will die tomorrow." The crowd jeered. The cage door creaked open. The girl flinched, curling tighter, expecting pain. But the human only bent down, his voice low. "You are free now," he said. The girl looked up, confused, her lips trembling. She could not believe it. Her whole life had been chains, cruelty, and mocking laughter. No one had ever spoken to her with kindness. He held out his hand. For a long moment, she stared at it. The market kept laughing, mocking both of them. "Human kindness will kill him," one alien sneered. "She will betray him." Another hissed. But slowly, carefully, the girl lifted her hand and placed it in his. Her fingers were cold, weak. Shaking, he did not let go. He pulled her gently out of the cage, step by step. The crowd kept shouting and laughing. But the human did not turn. He led her away from the noise, away from the mocking voices. Behind them, the merchant shook his head. "Foolish human," he muttered. But deep inside, the girl felt something strange. A small warmth in her chest. Something she had forgotten long ago. Hope and the market. The same market that laughed at her price. Did not know that this single choice, this single human, would change the fate of not only the broken girl, but also the galaxy itself. The dear, broken girl walked beside the human, her steps slow and weak. Chains had been removed, but her wrist still carried the red marks of iron. Every sound in the market behind them echoed in her ears. The laughter, the mocking voices, the cruel words. Her heart told her this must be another trick, another cruel game. Humans were rare in her world, and she had never seen one before. Why would he pay even 10 credits for her? The human walked quietly, not speaking much. His face was calm, his eyes sharp, as if always searching for danger. In the shadows of the busy streets, some merchants still laughed, pointing at him. Crazy human, they said. Buying trash, throwing money into fire. But he never turned to answer them. Instead, he guided her gently, his hand steady on her shoulder. Finally, they reached the edge of the market, where the noise grew weaker. The girl tried to pull away, afraid to go further. Her body shook and her eyes filled with fear. "What do you want from me?" Her voice cracked like dry wood. It was the first time she had spoken since leaving the cage. Her voice sounded broken, unused for so long. The human stopped and looked at her. "I want nothing," he said softly. "You are safe now." Dilly. Words made no sense to her. Her whole life, people wanted something, her body, her work, her pain. No one had ever said they wanted nothing. She stared at him with suspicion, her heart beating fast. "You bought me," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, I freed you." The girl could not understand. Freedom was only a dream, a story told in whispers among slaves. He led her to a small shelter outside the market walls. It was simple. A fire burning low, a pot with food, and blankets. The girl froze at the sight of the food. Her stomach ached, but fear stopped her from reaching out. She had been punished before for touching food without permission. The human saw her hesitation and slowly filled a bowl. He placed it in front of her without a word. She looked at him, waiting for the strike, waiting for the cruel laugh, but none came. He only sat down near the fire, eating his own bowl. "Eat," he said gently. Her hand shook as she lifted the bowl. The first sip of warm soup burned her throat. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had forgotten what kindness tasted like. The human watched her quietly. He did not rush her, did not ask questions. He seemed to understand that trust was not something given in one night. It had to be built, brick by brick, slowly. After eating, the girl pulled the blanket close, her body trembling. She still expected him to show his true face, to hurt her, to use her. But he only lay down across the fire, keeping his distance. She waited for hours, eyes wide open, but nothing happened. Finally, her body gave in, and she fell asleep. That night, nightmares came to her. She saw cages, whips, and chains. She screamed in her sleep, her body shaking. The human woke, but he did not shout at her. Instead, he whispered, "It's over. You're safe." He stayed awake, guarding her until the morning sun rose. The next day, when she opened her eyes, he was sitting by the fire, sharpening a small blade. He looked at her and said, "You don't have to fear me." She lowered her eyes, unsure how to answer. For a long time, silence stretched between them. Finally, she asked in a trembling voice, Why me? Why by me?" The human paused, his eyes steady. "Because everyone else saw nothing," he said. "But I saw someone still alive." The words struck her heart like lightning. For years she had been told she was worthless, broken, trash. Now a stranger, no, a human, spoke as if she mattered. She turned her face away, hiding her tears. The human did not push. He stood and began packing his things. "We leave today," he said. She looked at him, confused. "Where?" she asked. "A place where no chains can reach you," he answered as they walked. Whispers followed them, aliens shaking their heads, laughing at the sight. "The human is mad," they said. "She will bring him ruin." But the human did not care. Each step he took was firm, each choice clear. He had made his decision. The galaxy might laugh at him, mock him, even threaten him. But he would not leave her behind. That night, as stars spread across the sky, the girl sat by the fire. Hugging her knees, she looked at the human who stared into the flames, silent and steady. For the first time in years, she felt a strange, dangerous thing rise in her chest. It was not fear, not pain, not despair. It was something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. And in that small hope, the human's decision planted a seed that would grow into a story greater than both of them. The galaxy had laughed at her price, but soon it would bow to the truth of her worth. The morning sun painted the land in soft gold. The broken girl opened her eyes slowly, her body still weak, her mind still heavy with fear. For a moment she forgot where she was. Her heart jumped as she touched her wrists, expecting chains. But there were none. She was free, at least from the iron, at least from... The human was already awake, sitting near the fire, quietly repairing a torn piece of cloth. He looked up when she moved, but said nothing. His silence was calm, not cold. She had lived her life under shouting voices, cruel commands, and mocking laughter. His quietness felt strange, almost frightening in its kindness. She sat still, hugging her knees. Her stomach was empty, but she dared not ask. The human noticed and pushed a piece of bread toward her. "Eat," he said softly. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She bit into it carefully, as if it might be snatched away. But he only went back to his work, giving her space. Days passed like this. He walked with her through the empty roads, always carrying more weight than she did. He gave her food first before taking any for himself. At night, he kept the fire burning so she would not feel the darkness pressing too close. Slowly she began to watch him. She wondered why his eyes were so steady, why his steps were so sure, and most of all, why he had chosen her. At first she spoke nothing. Her voice had been locked away for years, hidden behind chains and pain. But one night, when the wind howled and the fire cracked, a single word slipped from her lips. "Why?" The human turned his head slowly. "Why what?" he asked. Her throat felt dry, but she forced the sound out. "Why me?" The human looked into the fire for a long time before answering. "Because you were not nothing," he said. "Everyone else saw nothing, but I saw someone still alive." The words confused her, yet they stirred something deep inside. For so long she had believed the voices that called her worthless. Now a single human told her she was alive. The thought felt dangerous, too big to hold, so she turned away and said no more. The next day, they walked through a small village. People stared, pointing and whispering. They recognized her face. The broken slave once mocked in the market. Some laughed, others shook their heads. "She will slow him down," one said. "She is cursed," another spat. The girl lowered her head, shame burning inside her, but the human kept walking, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Keep your eyes forward," he told her. She obeyed, though her chest hurt with every laugh she heard. That night, she cried silently under the blanket. She thought he was asleep, but his voice broke the silence. "They don't know you," he said. "They only see what they want to see." She froze, not knowing how he had read her heart so easily. Slowly, she whispered, "They are right. I am broken." The human shook his head, his eyes steady in the firelight. "No," he said. "You are wounded, not broken. Wounds can heal." His words echoed in her mind long after he slept. Could wounds really heal? Could she ever be more than the weak shadow the galaxy laughed at? The next days were not easy. She stumbled when she walked, her body still weak. She feared loud noises, jumping at every shout or sudden sound. She woke from nightmares, crying in silence. But each time, the human was there. He did not scold her, did not strike her, he only said, "You are safe." Again and again until she believed it, even if just a little. Then came the first change. While traveling through a forest, they heard rustling in the bushes. A small beast jumped out, teeth sharp, eyes wild. The girl screamed, falling to the ground. But the human drew his blade and stood between her and the beast. The fight was quick, the beast driven away. When it was over, the girl realized her body was moving without thought. She had grabbed a broken branch and held it like a weapon. Her hands shook, but in her eyes burned a faint fire. The human saw it and smiled. "You see? You are not weak," he said. She dropped the branch, staring at him. No one had ever called her strong. Not once. That night she dared to speak more. Her voice was still low, still broken, but she told him small things. Her name, her favorite, food long ago, a memory of her home. The human listened without interrupting. Every word she gave he treated as treasure. For the first time in years, she felt like her voice mattered. The fragile beginning had started. She was still afraid, still unsure, but a tiny seed had taken root. Trust. It was weak and small, but it was growing, and deep inside, she began to wonder. Could she truly become more than what the galaxy believed? The answer was far away, hidden in shadows and battles yet to come. But for now, in the warmth of the fire and the steady presence of the human, the broken girl took her first steps toward becoming whole. The days turned into weeks. The girl's steps grew stronger, her voice less afraid. She still carried fear in her heart, but it no longer crushed her like before. Every morning she walked beside the human, her head a little higher than the day before. The human taught her simple things: how to start a fire without fear of the flames, how to hold a knife not as a chain of slavery but as a tool of survival, how to read the sky, the stars, and the signs of weather. Each lesson was slow, patient, steady. At first she resisted, saying, "I cannot." But the human always replied, "You can." And slowly, piece by piece, she began to believe him. One night, while they camped near the river, she tried to help. Her hands clumsy, she gathered wood. The branches slipped, the fire went out, and shame burned her cheeks. She expected anger, punishment, mocking laughter. But the human only smiled. "Try again," he said. Her heart trembled, for no one had ever told her that. Mistakes were not failures that night. The fire she lit on her own burned brighter than any torch in the market. The human noticed something else too. When danger came, she moved without thinking. Once a snake slid near their camp, its fangs sharp and ready. Before he could act, she had thrown a stone with perfect aim. The snake fled into the shadows. She looked at her hands in shock, as if she had done something impossible. The human smiled. "There is strength inside you," he said. But she shook her head, not ready to believe fully. Still, a change was happening. The girl began to laugh, softly at his dry jokes. She began to ask questions about humans, about the galaxy, about the stars. The human answered what he could, his voice calm and thoughtful. For the first time in her life, learning was not a punishment, but a gift. At night, when nightmares came, she no longer cried in silence. She whispered them aloud. And he listened, never mocking, never judging. Sometimes he told his own stories, of battles he had fought, of friends he had lost, of choices he could not change. His honesty gave her courage to share her own scars. One evening, while traveling through a ruined village, they heard screams. A group of raiders was attacking a family. The human moved, quickly drawing his blade. But before he could step forward, the girl grabbed his arm. "I will help," she said, her voice trembling but filled with fire. He hesitated, seeing the fear still in her eyes, but then he nodded. "Stay close," he told her. The fight was short but fierce. The raiders did not expect resistance. The human fought like a storm, his blade flashing in the moonlight. The girl, shaking, lifted a fallen staff. She swung clumsily, but with desperate courage, striking one raider across the back. He stumbled, giving the human the chance to end the fight. When it was over, the family was safe and the raiders had fled into the night. The family bowed to them, thanking them with tears in their eyes. The girl stood frozen, her heart racing. Her hands still shook, but for the first time, it was not from fear. It was from power, from courage, from something new growing inside her. The human placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved them," he said simply. Her eyes widened. No, she whispered. You did. But he shook his head. You gave me the moment I needed. That moment saved their lives. The girl could not speak. Her chest burned with emotions she did not understand. For years, she had been called worthless, weak, broken. Now, for the first time, someone told her she had saved lives. The words echoed in her heart, louder than the laughter of the market. That night, as they camped by the fire, she sat in silence, staring into the flames. The human asked nothing, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she whispered, I was not useless. Her voice shook, but there was pride hidden inside. The human nodded slowly. You never were. You just needed someone to remind you. The fire crackled between them. In its light, something new was born. Not only trust, not only hope, but a spark that could grow into strength, a spark that could burn chains, burn fear, burn the lies told by the galaxy. The girl held on to that spark, afraid it might vanish. But deep inside, she knew it was hers, and no one could take it away. Far away, in the dark corners of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The broken slave who had once been sold for 10 credits was alive, walking beside a human. Enemies began to notice, old wounds began to stir. The spark she had found was only the beginning. The true fire was yet to come. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the camp. The girl sat with her knees pulled close, staring at the flames. Her heart was heavy, even after the small victories. The spark inside her was growing, but it also awakened memories she had buried deep. Memories too painful to speak. The human noticed her silence. He did not press her, but his calm eyes told her he was ready to listen if she chose. Finally, she whispered, You think I was always weak, but I was not. Her voice trembled as if each word was heavy. The human said nothing, waiting. The silence gave her courage. I was once a warrior, she said. Her hands gripped the blanket tightly. Not a slave, not broken, I fought for my people. Her words shocked even herself. For years, she had tried to forget who she was. Now the truth came spilling out, raw and sharp. She told him of her home, a world of silver skies and wide plains. Her people were proud and strong, a race known for their honor. She had trained as a royal guard, chosen for her courage and skill. I carried a blade, not chains, she said, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. I swore to protect the queen with my life. But then came the betrayal. She spoke of the day when warships fell from the sky, of allies who turned traitors, of comrades who sold her people for wealth and power. She fought bravely, but the enemy was endless. In the battle, she was struck down, her body broken. When she awoke, she was in chains, sold not as a warrior but as a slave. Her voice cracked. They said I was finished, too weak to fight again, too wounded to matter. The human listened carefully, his eyes never leaving her. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with respect. You were never weak, he said softly. You were betrayed. The girl's hands shook. No one had ever said it like that before. Everyone else had called her worthless, a failure, broken beyond repair. But the human's words cut through the lies. Tears rolled down her cheeks. They laughed at me, she whispered. In the market, in the cages, they laughed. The galaxy forgot who I was. Even I forgot. The human leaned closer, his voice steady. But I see you, not the broken slave. I see the warrior who still breathes. Her chest tightened. A storm of pain and pride battled inside her. Could she really still be that warrior? Could she rise again after so much loss? As the night stretched on, the truth weighed heavier. But telling her story lifted a piece of the chains from her soul. She had carried the burden in silence for too long. Now, with the human listening, the burden felt lighter. The next morning, the world seemed different. The girl stood taller, her eyes sharper. She was still wounded, still weak, but something inside had awakened. The memory of who she once was, not worthless, not trash. A Protector, a fighter, a guardian. But shadows were already moving. Far away, the slavers who had lost her whispered of revenge. They had seen the human walking with the broken slave, and some remembered her face. She was once royal guard, one hissed. If she lives, she is dangerous. Plans began to form in the dark. Hunters prepared to chase. The galaxy was not done with her yet. That evening, as they camped again, the girl sat beside the human, her voice stronger now. You should have left me, she said. I am not safe. I carry enemies with me. The human shook his head. I knew that the moment I saw you, he replied, and I chose anyway. She looked at him in disbelief. Why? She asked. Because no one deserves to be forgotten, he said. And because your story is not finished. The words struck her like thunder. Not finished. Her life was not over, her worth not lost. A fire burned inside her chest. Small, but fierce. That night she dreamed of her past. But for the first time, the dream did not end in despair. In the dream, she stood tall again, blade in hand. Beside her stood the human, steady as always. Together, they faced the darkness when she awoke. The fire was still burning low. The human sat watch, eyes scanning the night. She looked at him and whispered softly to herself, I will rise again. The galaxy thought she had been broken. The market laughed at her price. But now her past was no longer a chain. It was a weapon. And with the human by her side, she would learn how to use it again. The road ahead grew darker. Forests turned to rocky paths, and the air carried a sharp edge of danger. The human sensed it first, the way the wind fell silent, the way shadows lingered too long. The girl noticed, too, her warrior instinct slowly returning. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the memory of battle. They walked through a narrow canyon when the attack came. Voices shouted from above, metal scraped against stone. Figures dropped down from the cliffs, slavers and raiders, their eyes glowing with greed, the same kind of men who had once chained her. The leader laughed, pointing his blade. Look what we have here, the broken slave and her foolish human. The girl froze, her body trembling, chains seemed to echo in her mind. Her past screamed at her, you are weak, you cannot fight. But the human stepped forward, blade in hand, his eyes sharp. Stay behind me, he said firmly. The raiders charged. The clash of steel filled the canyon. The human moved like water, blocking, striking, never wasting a step. But there were too many. Blades cut the air, stones fell, the sound of battle roared. The girl crouched in fear, her body shaking. Memories of cages and laughter filled her mind. But then she saw him. The human bleeding from a wound on his arm, still fighting, still protecting her. Her heart pounded. Something inside her snapped. No, she whispered. Not again. She grabbed a fallen spear, her hands tight on the handle. Her body screamed with weakness, but her spirit burned. When a raider came too close, she swung, the strike clumsy but fierce. The spear struck his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. For a moment, the canyon froze. The broken slave had struck back. The raider leader sneered. So the dog still has teeth, he growled. He lunged at her, blade raised, but the human blocked the strike, pushing the man back. He looked at the girl, his voice strong. Fight, he told her. You are not broken, not anymore. Her hands shook, but she raised the spear again. The battle became chaos. The human fought with deadly skill. The girl fought with raw courage. Each strike, each scream, tore away. The chains still holding her spirit, she was no longer hiding, no longer silent. She was fighting side by side with him. The raiders began to falter. One by one they fell, surprised by the strength of their prey. The girl's body burned with pain, her wounds reopened, but she did not stop. Her heart roared louder than the laughter of the market. Her spirit blazed brighter than the chains of her past. At last the leader stood alone, blood on his face, rage in his eyes. He pointed his blade at the girl. You should have stayed in chains. He spat. The girl tightened her grip on the spear. Her eyes met his without fear. "No," she said, her voice steady. "I was never meant for chains," she charged, her strike fast and fierce. The spear cut across his chest, and he fell to the ground with a cry. The canyon fell silent. The raiders fled into the night. Defeated, breathing hard, the girl dropped the spear. Her hands were covered in blood, her body weak, but her heart was strong, stronger than it had ever been. The human walked to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You fought," he said. She looked up at him, eyes wide. I was afraid," she whispered. He nodded. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is fighting even when fear is heavy." Tears filled her eyes. She had fought, not perfectly, not without fear, but she had stood, she had struck, she had survived. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Not a shadow, not worthless, not broken. Alive. As the night fell over the canyon, the fire of battle still burned in her chest. The human tended his wounds, his hands steady even in pain. The girl sat close, silent but proud. Her mind replayed the fight, each strike, each choice. The chains in her memory felt lighter. The warrior in her heart had awakened again. Far away, word of the battle began to spread. The raiders whispered of the girl who fought beside a human. The slave who once sold for 10 credits had drawn blood from her enemies. The galaxy would not ignore her for long, and neither would those who once betrayed her. That night, as she lay by the fire, she whispered to herself, "I am not broken." Her voice was soft but steady, and the stars above seemed to listen. The test of fire had burned her, scarred her, but it had also shaped her into something new, something stronger. And this was only the beginning. The canyon was silent after the battle. Ashes of the campfire glowed softly, painting the girl and the human in faint orange light. The broken slave who once cost 10 credits now sat with blood on her hands, not from chains, but from battle. Her chest rose and fell with pride and fear mixed together. She had survived the test of fire. But the true storm was still ahead. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Whispers moved from one market to another, from one spaceport to the next. "The broken slave fights again," they said. "The girl who was sold for 10 credits now stands beside a human." Some laughed in disbelief. Others grew restless. But those who once betrayed her felt fear. They remembered the warrior she used to be, and they knew if she rose again, their crimes would be exposed. One evening, as they camped by the ruins of an old outpost, shadows appeared on the horizon. Dozens of armed mercenaries hired by her old enemies marched forward. Their leader called out, his voice loud and cruel. "Give us the girl, human. She was never yours to take. She belongs in chains." The girl's heart pounded, her body still weak from wounds. For a moment, fear returned. The memory of chains pulled at her mind, whispering lies. But then she looked at the human standing, tall beside her, blade in hand. He was ready to face them all, even if it meant his death. Her fear turned into fire. "No," she said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, carrying across the ruins. "I do not belong to you. I never did." The mercenaries laughed, mocking her courage. But her words struck like thunder in her own heart. Chains shattered inside her spirit. She was no longer the slave of the market. She was the warrior who had risen again. The battle that followed was fierce. Blades clashed. Fire lit the sky. The human fought like a storm, cutting through enemies with skill and precision. The girl fought with raw strength, her staff swinging, her body burning with pain but her spirit unbroken. For every strike she made, a memory of her past returned. The training, the honor, the pride of her people. She was not fighting as a slave. She was fighting as a guard, as a protector, as herself. At the height of the battle, the mercenary leader cornered her, his blade pressed against hers, sparks flying. "You are still broken," he spat. "You are nothing but a price in the market." The girl's eyes burned as she pushed back, her voice sharp as steel. "My worth is not for you to decide." With a final cry, she struck him down. The ruins echoed with silence. The mercenaries fled, leaving only the girl and the human standing among the ashes. When it was over, she fell to her knees, breathless, her body aching, but her eyes shone with fierce light. The human walked to her side, helping her stand. "You fought like a warrior," he said. She looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "I am a warrior," she whispered. The words tasted new, powerful, alive. And for the first time she believed them. Days later, they returned to the same market where she was once mocked. The crowd that had laughed at her price now whispered in fear and awe. "Is that her?" they said. "The slave of 10 credits?" But she did not lower her head this time. She walked tall beside the human, her scars no longer marks of shame but of survival. The merchant who once sold her hid behind his stall. He could not meet her eyes. She stopped in front of him, her gaze sharp. "You laughed at my price," she said, her voice steady. "You thought I was worthless. Now tell me, do I look worthless?" The merchant stammered, unable to speak. The crowd fell silent, the sound of her voice echoing in every ear. The human placed a hand on her shoulder, proud. "You see," he said quietly. "The galaxy measures worth in coins and chains, but true worth cannot be bought. It must be lived." The girl lifted her head, her eyes filled with fire. She was no longer the broken slave. She was no longer the girl who feared chains. She was the warrior who had risen from the ashes. Her true worth was greater than any market, greater than any price. And beside her stood the human who had seen it from the very beginning. The galaxy would never forget the story of the slave who cost only 10 credits. Because she had become, more than a story, she had become a symbol. A reminder that no laughter, no chains, no betrayal could destroy a spirit that refused to die. And as the stars stretched endless above them, the human and the girl walked forward together, not as master and slave, not as broken and whole, but as equals. Two souls who had faced the fire and found their true worth.